So here we are, Goodwood's members meeting, a fabulous place to be. This year they're doing a celebration of F1 cars and they're running these things just after lunch. So we're here helping John today, this weekend, run this fabulous piece of kit. So what is this car? This is the original 1990 Nelson Piquet Benetton F1 car. It also won in Suzuka and Adelaide. It is the real deal, this thing. People say, you know, is this the real one? This is it. We've got the Cosworth.
Original works, Cosworth HP, 3.5 litre,
V8. With about, how many horsepower has this got?
700.
So we've got 700 horsepower in
500 kilos.
500 kilos. So this is the real deal, this thing. Thinking about the weekend, this thing has to be intravenously warmed. You can see the water heater over here. About 2 hours before we go to start the thing up, we've got to warm all the oils and all the coolants up to get it all warm before we even push the start button. And when it comes to start this thing, you're not going to want to miss it. One of the things that I noticed, that when you sit in this thing, your feet come right down to here, but the steering rack goes across the top of your legs, and the anti-roll bar goes underneath your shins, so you sort of go over and under and up, and the pedals are tiny little pedals. I mean, these shoes wouldn't be any good at all. So just getting in this thing. So for John, I mean, you've had this car for sort of 10, 15 years now. What is it like to drive? You've got fast road cars now, you drive an F40 a lot, so what's this thing like to actually drive?
Well, first of all, it's just a car, because it's got 3 pedals and an H-pattern 6-speed dog box.
So we're on manual gearbox, there's no pedals on this, it's a manual.
Just all manual, just like an ordinary car.
But a crash gearbox,
yeah,
no synchros.
Dog box, yeah. You have to get through the gears quickly. You can't sort of delay in a gear, otherwise it will just, it misses the dogs, yeah, and it just crunches. You've got to... The acceleration is, yes, it's obviously it's fast. It'll do 0 to 180 in 8 seconds.
So let's just don't try in 8 seconds. I mean, yeah. I know I've spoken to you before, and you said it's almost like blurred vision time. This thing, yeah, the G-force it gives you. Yeah. I mean, this is an F1 car. This isn't a normal car. This is quick. This is starts to move your body around at that sort of G-force.
Yeah, you're strapped in really tight. The straps come down over your shoulders, so you're crushed down, so you don't move in it. You've got to be solid. You've got to be really tight in the car. You can't be rattling about. But really, the thing about speed is, because it is so fast, you don't really get the sensation of the acceleration, because you're just looking at the end of the straight, which is going to happen a few seconds later.
By the time you've looked at it.
Yeah, so you'll glance down at some of the gauges, and then you're back on the circuit, you're looking where you're going, and you're picking your turning in point, your braking points, and that's what you're concentrating on. So the sensation of speed is overcome really by the concentration you have to put into driving it.
Yeah, this isn't something you just get in and drive quickly. And I know when I've spoken to you before, that I know you took it out to Suzuka, you've done a lot of the Grand Prix circuits in this thing, doing demonstrations all around the world. And one of the things you got to, that once you got through the sort of tyre grip era, then you had to go the next level to the aero grip era, which I know was like really like, okay, yeah, this is another level now.
Yeah, you can't just trust the fate. You've got your brain always overtakes and stops you doing what the car is capable of doing. So you have to work to it gradually, and I'm not even there yet. But the very last minute break and turning in is just so. I mean, at Catalonia, I was, after a day of driving, I was braking at the just short of the 100-metre mark into the first right-hand corner.
Right.
And I watched the F1 guys when they were doing it, and they were braking at 50 metres, and just flicking through the corners and gone. And there's no way I can get anywhere near that.
So, and I know you get a lot of enjoyment from this car. You bring it out, you do sort of lunchtime demonstrations and things. So I know it gives you a lot of enjoyment, and I know the people at Goodwood today are going to really enjoy the noise of this thing when it starts up. Is just phenomenal.
That will be the drinks button.
Right.
Purely because when they're going into a corner and they're changing gear, they wouldn't be using the drinks, they wouldn't bother with the drinks button. That's the radio button, so that they can be on the radio whilst they're changing gear. So that's why they're that way round.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You've got the extinguisher fire button there. You've got rear wet red light at the back, ignition, and then that's the fuel pumps. So we'll put the ignition on, get some oil pressure, and then we'll put the pumps on and fire it up. So that's the sequence.
And then a very basic, you've got a rev counter here. That what does this thing rev to? Goes around to about
12.
About 12,000.
Yeah, in you don't detune it, but when they were racing, they would take it to about 13.
Right.
But then they'd occasionally pop the revs up if they changed down a bit too early.
Right.
And that's why they got through 57 engines with 6 chassis.
Crikey.
That's not all the chassis they did, but the notes I've got, 6 chassis, 57 engines.
Blimey. So, and now you run it just to preserve the car?
Now the limit's on just shy of 12.
Right.
We've got the shift light at 11.2, peak torque is about there, so it gives me a little bit of an overrun to about 11.6 before I hit the limiter at 11.8.
Right. So I get
so
it's not far off then.
No.
It's still up there.
Well, it doesn't even fuel right until it's doing 7,000.
Right, okay.
So all the fueling is out of balance.
So it doesn't really get going until 7.
Really, the power is between 9-ish, 9.5 and 11.
Blimey. So you've got to be on it. You've got to drive this thing hard. You can't pussyfoot around in this thing then.
Oh, no, it wants to be driven hard.
It's got to be going.
Yeah.
And then you literally just got a very small display there with temperatures.
That gives me oil temperatures, oil pressure, water temperature, just various things like that.
Just the basic functions. And a seat that obviously
seat's moulded to me.
Moulded to you, so you're the only one. You're the only one that fits this thing.
Well, of my sort of shape.
Your sort of shape. Yeah. And the bit that gets me, the lovely little wooden gear lever down here.
Nelson Piquet. Let me turn that ignition off. Nelson Piquet didn't like the metal gear knob because the resonance made his hand go numb, the zinging of the resonance. So Piquet, from his Lotus days, always had a wooden gear knob.
And it's still on there today.
And there it is.
Brilliant.
It's been FIA HTP, so I've got the FIA hologram sticker on it.
So this is all up to date and legal, so to speak.
It's historic technical passport. So up to historic is classed as up to and including 90.
Right.
This is a 90 car, so the end of 90 is when it runs out. Beyond 90, 91 cars don't yet qualify for historic. Although there's all the others running, of course.
And another thing I know we've spoken about before with this, you were very fortunate when you got the car, you got all the parts package that they hadn't used from the F1 team. So you've actually got, because you just can't buy bits for this car, but you've got most of the bits you need should something...
5 floors, radiators, spare rear end, gearbox, dry sump, carbon tub, fuel cell, bag tank is inside here. Fuel comes out through these dry brakes, which have got wires on them, so that if you have an accident and you rip this end of the car off from that end of the car, the wires pull the dry brakes, disconnects the fuel line, seals them so you don't get fuel pouring out everywhere. So that's why you've got that. There's a vent, electronics for the pumps that are inside the tanks. ECU is in there, feeds the coil packs, spark box, which then obviously fires the engine. This half is bolted to this half with these plates. There's 3 plates that size. 1, 2, 1 underneath, all the same. That joins that on to that.
So the whole normal F1 stuff, the whole lot's bolted to the tub, and then we've got the gearbox and with all the suspension. And I love the suspension on this. I mean, it's like aeroplane wings. It's all very, very purposeful stuff.
So you've got V8 HP 3.5 litre, flat slide throttles. Then you've got a dry.
So flat slide throttles, right? Okay. So this, for the people that are non-technical on this, when you open up a tube, you've got, if you put a butterfly in the middle and twist it, there's still a restriction. If you've got a flat slide throttle, it slides right out the way, so the whole of the Venturi is completely open, so there's no restrictions at all.
And maximum power is full open throttle. So hopefully most of the time the throttle's full open.
And there's other things. I know the things like the exhaust, in-canal exhaust. Even back in the 90s, there was a lot of technology going on with these, as well as all that. But Formula One has always been the top of whatever's available at that time to go in these cars, and this has certainly got it.
Yeah, 0.8 mil in-canal.
We're going to prime the oil pumps.
Turn the engine over, scavenge the oil out, get some oil pressure before we fire it. Can't fire it with oil in the engine.
Turn it a few times, get the oil pressure up.
Yeah. Fire it.
Switch, fire it up.
Let it idle, on a fast idle.
Fast idle, which is about 3,500 revs.
Yeah.
To get the oil temperature
until we get it up to about 60, 70, 65.
Right.
Then we can bring the revs up a bit more.
Right.
80 off.
So when it gets to 80 degrees, that's
off.
everything warmed up, then we can shut it down.
Then we just let it heat soak, so all that heat goes into all the metal of the engine, into the crankshaft and everywhere, just soak right the way in. Then it'll cool down a bit, and then we'll fire it up again an hour later.
Before we go out on the track. And to start the car, we've got this battery operated segment back here. So what we've got, obviously F1 cars don't have starter motors, so we've got a battery operated lance that goes through into the back of the gearbox directly onto the crankshaft. Yeah, is that right, Andy?
Yes.
Yeah. Onto the back of the crankshaft to turn the thing over. And there's a hand signal that Andy and John have in the mirrors so they can see what each other's doing. And believe me, once this thing starts, you're not going to run it here very much.
Okay. Another little burst, short burst.
So here we are at the end of the day at Goodwood. What a fantastic day. The cars performed brilliantly. John's had a brilliant play in the car. The crowd were really appreciative of the cars going round. They sounded superb.
Lots of noise.
Lots of noise is what Goodwood is all about. So we must say a big thank you to Aston Lark and Aviva Insurance for helping us out on this one. We've got a lot of clients that use them for their facilities. They insure things like this, and they help a lot of clients out with different collections and multiple cars. So a big thank you to them for today.